Hello, everyone, and welcome this morning. We are just taking a moment to make sure that all of our sound and video is in working order. So I'm getting the thumbs up from my team. Thank you all for joining us, and we will be with you in just a moment. Okay. Well, good morning, everyone, and once again, welcome to our discussion with Bart Hadder from the Murdock Trust. The format today is simple. I'm going to introduce Bart. He's going to speak for just a little bit about the Murdock Trust. I have some questions that I've prepared in advance to ask him, and then the last part of our discussion today will be an opportunity for all of you to ask questions of him. So you'll be able to chat those in throughout the presentation. I just wanted to let you know that we are here in person. We have measured this table. It's more than 6 feet. When Bart is not speaking, I will be wearing my mask, and my team is socially distanced and mask wearing as well. So just letting you know that safety is always our #1 priority. Thank you so much. All right, well, I'm going to introduce Bart. So Bart served as a program director at the MJ Murdock Charitable Trust from 2001 to 2015, where he reviewed grant requests from numerous nonprofits in the Northwest, administered grants, and directed a research program for science teachers. Since his retirement from full-time work, he's continued serving the nonprofit community through consulting, presenting, coaching leaders and boards, and doing special projects for the Murdock Trust. Prior to joining the Trust, Bart's first career involved serving as a science teacher both at the middle and high school levels, and as the K-12 science coordinator for the Beaverton School District in Oregon. He is a graduate of the University of Washington and earned his master's degree at Portland State University. Welcome, Bart, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you all that are participating online and participating in this event. I just want to say that Murdock Trust that I work for and now I do some consulting with so appreciates all the good work that's being done by nonprofits throughout our region. And it's so amazing to me to have been in this philanthropy world for a number of years and just seeing the great, I consider it like a tapestry, with just so many different colored threads, different nonprofits serving our communities in various ways. And there is some overlap in what nonprofits do, but there's some distinctives. Each one of you do some things that are distinct in your area. And just like that, I would say our foundations throughout, as I've learned throughout this region and across the country, are really like another tapestry that exists to support nonprofits. And again, they're like a tapestry, different colored threads doing different things, supporting different areas. So if you learn about one foundation, the kind of inside joke is you've learned about one foundation, because we're all a little bit unique, and yet there's some basic principles that hopefully that you'll hear no matter which foundation you talk to that will strengthen your approach to a foundation. So I'm hoping that I can share that today, whether or not what you're doing or your project might be a good fit with the trust. Hopefully I'll share some ideas that will strengthen what you're doing as you approach any other funders. And perhaps there'll be something you have that you'd like to work on that Murdock Trust might be able to support.
Fantastic.
So let me just give you a brief background of the Murdock Charitable Trust, just as thumbnail history. So MJ Murdock Charitable Trust is a testamentary trust. We were set up from the estate of the late Melvin Jack Murdock. Jack Murdock was born and raised in Portland, Oregon. And after World War II, serving the country in the military, he came back and he and his partner thought they could build a better oscilloscope than what the Navy had given them to work with. So they started this little company called Tektronix. Now, I don't know if you've heard of that before. It started small and eventually it went worldwide. I think at one point employing about 80,000 employees, and was, I think, a key factor in transforming the economy of Oregon from more agriculture of timber to high tech. And as a result of that, there's a lot of high tech going on. We call it Silicon Forest Northwest, and Tektronix was really kind of the beginning of that. Well, sadly, Jack passed away in an airplane accident in 1971, and he'd never been married, so he had no wife, no children, but he had the foresight to have a will drawn up before he passed away, and he left instructions for 3 of his close friends to be trustees and to take his estate and set up a charitable trust that patterned their giving much after the giving Jack had while he was alive. So based on, he had a number of hobby businesses. Probably his favorite hobby business was selling Piper aircraft. So he had the Piper aircraft distributorship for Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Montana, and Alaska. So the trustees thought that would be the appropriate area for the Murdock Foundation to do their grant making. So again, honoring our benefactor and his the things he liked to support, our mission is to enrich the quality of life in the Pacific Northwest by providing grants and enrichment programs to organizations that strengthen the region's educational, social, spiritual, and cultural base in creative and sustainable ways. And so the trust has been true to that mission in all these years. They've been in existence now about 45 years. We opened our doors in 1975 with 91 million in assets. Since that time, the trust has granted over 7,300 grants, and they've granted about over $1.1 billion out of 91 million. And their assets are someplace around 1.5 billion right now. So they've been blessed, and they've been able to bless others and continue to do that in the Northwest. We have 3 trustees that meet 4 times a year for the purpose of grant makings. They meet in February, May, August, and November. And at each of those meetings, actually the number of grants they're seeing has increased in the last year. And they're looking at like 80 to 85 proposals per grant meeting. There's about a 70, someplace in the neighborhood of 70% success rate of the proposals to get in front of the trustees. And anyway, during this conversation, I'm sure I'll get a chance to talk with you about how do you approach the trust and what makes a strong proposal. But I'm really interested in hearing your questions and hopefully giving you some insights. So welcome.
Great. Great. Thank you so much. That was a fantastic overview. And I just made a couple notes because this is just some information that's sort of been updated. So starting with 91 million in 1975, over the course of the years, 7,300 grants, $1.1 billion granted, and $1.5 billion in current assets. That's incredible. And what a testament to his legacy. And I never get tired of hearing his story. And if you ever get a chance to visit their website, it's a really robust resource that actually has a phenomenal history of the trust and of their founder, and also has great information about just the application process. And I want to take just a minute to talk through, from our perspective, some of what it looks like. So for us, we are funded by the MJ Murdock Charitable Trust. So we always, when it's our time to apply or reapply for a grant, we always submit an LOI, a letter of interest, to the trust. And what I love the most about the trust is there's no deadline. It's just sort of a rolling open invitation to submit your letter of interest. So really the time frame is more based on your own capacity. So we submit the letter of interest, and they have this great, robust grant portal as well, where you can track progress. So then I also don't find that I need to bother Rudy or Dana or Kimberly or anybody else at the trust. I'm able to track things as they progress. So once your letter of interest has been read through, reviewed, then we've received an invitation to go ahead and apply for the grant. I will say it takes us quite a bit of time to put everything together, but all of the work that goes into completing a grant request for the Murdock Trust is probably one of the most beneficial exercises that our organization goes through every 3 years when we reapply for a grant, because they really take a deep dive look at all of your programs, your key performance indicators, your financials, the strength and the health and well-being of your board. And all of those things are incredibly informative to your organization, regardless of the status of, once you get to the point where the information is being presented to the trustees. Every step along the way, your contact is incredibly helpful. Rudy's been our program officer for this most recent grant cycle. And I will say, he came and we met in this room pre-COVID. He asked us a number of questions. We had board members and staff involved. And really what was fantastic about it is not only did we feel so confident that we knew so much about our organization that we could answer his questions, but what he does is his job is actually then to go back and work with the rest of the program officers and make sure that they're filling in any gaps or any questions the trustees might ask. So not only is your process putting the application together, but that program officer's responsibility in meeting with you is answering preemptively the questions that the trust might want to ask during that quarterly grant meeting, where now they're reviewing 80 to 85 grant applications. And so that is a lot of work, but I will tell you the process is incredibly informative for your organization. So I just wanted to kind of share that back with you. We hear once we're in, it's about 6 months once we've submitted our grant before our grant then goes before the trustees. So it's definitely a process. It is not a quick turnaround by any means, but because of the thoroughness of the way in which they approach this process, as Bart mentioned, they have a 70% success rate of proposals in front of the trustees, and I think that that's significant. So really all along the way, they're helping to prepare you for success. So with that, I pulled a few questions from our registration form that I wanted to sort of ask Bart, and then after that, we're going to open it up in case there's other questions that you may have. So be thinking about questions you have to chat in, and then we will take the last section of our discussion today to ask him those as well. So the first one that I really love this question. So what are some recent examples of projects funded in Idaho, and really looking at those past grantees, what projects stand out to you and why?
That's a great question. Unfortunately, I've been out of the office for 5 years now. So in terms of recent grants the trust has made here in Idaho, I apologize. I don't have a good handle on that, but I know the kinds of grants the trust has made. I know what we've done in the past.
Perfect.
And so again, we support, arts and culture, education. I think about private colleges and universities throughout the Pacific Northwest. And so right here in this area, there's Northwest Nazarene University, there's the College of Idaho. In terms of state schools, I know we've made grants to Boise State for scientific research and for the Partners in Science program. It's an opportunity for high school science teachers to do research during the summer. And there's a number of programs with youth and social services. And can you go back to what have I missed here?
Oh, just so examples of projects funded in Idaho, and then looking at recent past grantees. Were there any, even from your time, that really stood out to you, and why would that be?
I think one of the most unique grants the trust ever made was to an organization called Quest Aircraft Company, and they're in Sandpoint, Idaho, and they developed an airplane to be used for humanitarian purposes around the world. And so that was pretty unique, and it's just impacting lives around the globe. And with a startup organization there in Sandpoint, Idaho, and now they've got a place in the map. But there's lots of other good ones, grants to YMCAs and arts organizations, the Anne Frank Memorial, and other health and human services, just numerous grants. I'm one of those guys who goes into Baskin Robbins and 32 flavors, and there's 30 of those flavors I agonize over, which do I want today? So there's so many great grants, it's hard to just
hard to select just one. No worries. And then another question, and I hopefully you've got some recent information, but I thought this was a really thoughtful question just in light of what's happened over the last year or so. But have you seen the focus of the foundation funding adapt to current needs around COVID or maybe even diversity, equity, inclusion? And do you see these changes being more widespread and or permanent?
Yeah, that's really a great question. And so there's kind of two answers to that. One, that Trust is really interested in the needs of our region and responding to those needs. And so when COVID hit, the Trust has made quite unusual, over $15 to $16 million in grants to deal with that issue here in the Pacific Northwest. So some of them are medical related or research related, but many are to organizations like here. Amy, you've been involved with your organization and United Way and Idaho Community Foundation and others. The Trust made a major grant to your constituency that then you were able to disperse the funds to help in a variety of ways. So the Trust made some special grants to that and are continuing to pay attention to what's going on and look at the need and consider what to do here in this next year. But a piece of good news is while some foundations have had to pull back on their regular grant making, Murdock Trust has not pulled back from the regular grant making program. So we continue to support those kinds of projects that are top priority for organizations. So our doors are still open. And while we're doing business a little bit different, prior to COVID, we'd make a site visit to every organization that you got a grant proposal in the door. So like with Amy, we would sit here at this table, we'd come to your site, meet with your leadership and your board, and allow you to kind of fully color in the picture of your organization and your project. And then the program director, as Amy said, goes back and prepares a review and an analysis of your organization and your project. And then our trustees, we get that along with your application, and then they have that for 2 or 3 weeks prior to the meeting. It's kind of funny that over time, technology has progressed. When I was there, we were just exiting using paper, but every quarter, our trustees and program directors have a stack of proposals in review and analyses. I think it was like 12 to 14 inches high. And that was at about 60, 65 proposals a quarter. Now that they're up to 80, I'm guessing if they used paper, they'd be up closer to 18, 20 inches. So I share that because just as you think about writing a proposal for the Trust and think about the volume of what the Trust has to read, just an encouragement on the side of grant writing, being clear and concise is really appreciated and it's helpful to you. It's hard for the Trust to make a grant for things they don't understand. But anyway, so the Trust is still open and still considering proposals. So I'm not anticipating a change in that.
So really more business as usual, and on top of that, some really wonderful strategic funding throughout the region in support of larger, broader COVID relief efforts. And we are so thankful for the partnership with the Community Foundation, United Way, and also the large investment of the Murdock Trust in that COVID relief fund, which we're still actually making some grant requests from even today. So that's awesome. Another really great question is, and this is kind of a lengthy one, but I really like this. So conventional wisdom around the relationship between funders and nonprofits continues to evolve, including just around reporting and requirements around overhead and some potentially sticky topics. So how has the Trust responded to these issues, and have they changed your relationship with grantees?
That's a great multifaceted question. First, let me say that the Murdock Trust is a very relational foundation. That being said, unlike some funders, you don't have to know somebody at the Trust. You don't have to have talked to somebody at the Trust to be able to get a proposal in the door. You can come in with a letter of inquiry and we may have never have heard of you before. And as a matter of fact, each quarter, about 30% of the proposals we receive are from organizations that we've not seen before. Wow. And many of those have not talked to us. But that does not prevent them from getting funded if they have a good proposal. So there's other factors we looked at. And once you get a proposal in the door, and we'll, like I said, we used to do on-site site visits. Now we'll do a Zoom, probably site visit with you, and get to know you. And whether you're funded or not, You've had a chance to hear from the trust and learn about what questions the trust is concerned about. And even if you don't get funded on your first proposal, if there's other organizations like yours, other projects kind of like yours you see on our website, then chances are maybe you can be funded again. So don't hesitate to come back with another proposal. Don't be discouraged by that. And so help me with the other facets of your question.
Yes, and so really they were just kind of wondering around some of how we report back on our grants. So and I think a lot of the question comes around this idea of overhead. So there's been a shift really, and I think a lot of us are starting to recognize that, and I think really what they're getting at is how much is the trust starting to really support the notion of unrestricted grant funds. So grant funds specific maybe to a program, but not limited to certain things. So can they use it for overhead? Can they use it for staff salaries? So what flexibility is there being built into some of those grant requests? Because there's a lot of these questions from other places around, when you look at an organization's financial picture and making decisions about funding them or not looking at their percent of overhead to overall revenues and things of that nature. So do you know if there's been any shifts or changes, or really more broadly speaking, how does the trust approach when they're looking at financials and making grants some of those tougher questions?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the trust recognizes that overhead's an important financial challenge for organizations. And there are a lot of smaller foundations that will fund overhead. The trust typically has not done that. I think maybe some of our COVID grants for COVID funding that we've made to organizations like yours, and you've dispersed them to deal with programs, that may have covered some overhead. But specifically, the trust typically does not allow trust dollars for overhead. We're a foundation that makes larger grants than most of the foundations in our region. And so based on the philosophy of what Jack did when he was alive and helping organizations, he would help an organization go from the level they're at to a higher level that could be sustained. So he helped strong organizations get even better. And so they're anticipating that the strong organization has good funding in place to be sustained on their own without this project. And then with this project, it'll take them to an even greater level. So, we realize overhead is there. We look to see, how you're doing on funding that, but really the role of Murdock is to help you achieve something greater, expansion, whether capital or staff. And I might just mention that about 40% of the trust grant making goes towards capital projects, and about 40% goes to staff increase. And then about 20% goes to equipment and technology, like scientific equipment and major equipment, major technology kinds of grants.
And I'm really glad that you brought that up as well. So, and on their website, they have a really great explanation of the kinds of projects. Not only you can see what they funded in the past, and as soon as they announce their quarterly grant awards, they're up on the website. So you can start to get a sense of the types of projects that they like to fund. So I strongly encourage you to go and look on their website. It's a tremendous resource that really does explain how the trust chooses to fund. And I will say they are larger grants. And that also I think is proportionate to the work that goes in up front and preparing for the application again. And something that you mentioned earlier rolls really nicely into the next question, and just talking about the number of applications that come in the door from organizations that you've never, heard of before. So one question that actually appeared multiple times in our sort of what questions would you like to ask Bart form is, how can a new organization best introduce itself to the trust?
Yeah, that's a great question, and the answer for Murdock is probably different than the answer to a family foundation or an individual donor. I know there, networking, having somebody that can introduce you to that person, it can be really critical. But with the Murdock Trust, you don't have to know anybody at the trust. Matter of fact, very few people, compared to the number of organizations that come in, know the trustees or know a program director or have even talked to us. So I think that kind of to just back up again and review, because it doesn't hurt to hear this a few times, the best way to start with Murdock is just to get on our website and look at our website, see who the trust is, what we're interested in funding, look at past grants. You'll see what we're interested in. And then there's very clear directions on how to apply for a grant from Murdock, on how to do this letter of inquiry that Amy talked about, this step by step. So it's not that tough to do that. And by clearly representing your organization and your project, that's the best way to introduce yourself to us. And then our senior program director looks to see if there's a rough fit between your organization and the kind of organizations we fund, and your project and the kind of projects we fund. And if so, then he invites you to submit a full-on application. And then there you get a chance to further expand your information about your organization and your project. And then with the site visit, we'll get to know you even better. And fund it or not, you've learned, and hopefully the next time you come back, whether you're successful or not, hopefully you'll be successful in the future. I might say, though, in terms of overhead and ongoing operations, the trust does not fund ongoing operations. We don't consider ourselves part of anybody's constituency, being a regional foundation, but we're there to help. And it's not uncommon for organizations to come back to us in the future, but we're not one that sustains you on it. We hope your own constituency would do that, but we're there to help you with more major things that maybe your own constituency might not have full capacity without some extra help.
And I have two more questions that I'm going to ask, and then we're going to open it up. So as you're thinking of your questions, feel free to chat those in now, because we're getting close to where it's your turn. So I'm gonna switch order on these last two questions, because this second question that I'm going to ask actually relates to some of what we were just talking about. And the question is it better for a prospective grantee to reach out to a program officer only after their project is mostly fleshed out, or earlier in the development stage? So what they're asking basically is, before they even get to the LOI, should they reach out? Should they make a connection? And how far along do they need their project? And so at what point really does that become more of a relationship building opportunity with somebody from the trust? And a follow-up question to that, this is a good one, but can grant seekers reach out to program officers to pitch ideas?
Yeah, but those are all great questions. You can contact the trust anytime and ask a question anytime. And I would encourage you to make most efficient use of your time and the program director's time I would spend a little bit of time on the Murdock website and kind of looking over the information there, look over the hints to for grant seeking, and make sure you've read that. It's a little embarrassing if you contact the trust with the questions right there in black and white on the website. But if you look at something you don't understand or confused or need some expansion, please feel free to contact the trust. We're happy to talk with people anytime. Back pre-COVID, some organizations would stop by the trust and talk to us, and we always welcome that. But again, I would guess that the majority of organizations that come to the trust, and even I would say probably even the majority of organizations that get funded, have not come in the door of Murdock Trust, and maybe have not even called prior to. So that's not a prerequisite. I just want to emphasize that. But if you have a question, please feel free to call. We want to make sure you're clear and want to work with you on that.
Fantastic. And I just want to add a little bit to the relationship piece. So one of the programs that we actually run in partnership with the Murdock Trust is Essentials for Development. And when it comes to relationships with your funders, we always try to encourage people to build a relationship all along the way, even through and after you receive your first round of funding from the trust. So I just had a phone Zoom conversation yesterday with Dana Miller from the trust. So we always try to maintain contact and communication and keeping them updated and involved in what we're doing. So we sort of try to treat the trust as we would any other major donor to our organization through our major gift development program. So we build a relationship. We try to engage them in our work. We keep them updated. So we're not reporting back to them and then asking them for something more. And that's our only contact with them. So maintaining communication and updates and getting them engaged in your work to the extent possible, especially now with COVID, I think is a great way to really deepen your relationship with the trust. And they're all just absolutely lovely people. So the last question before we get to your questions, and there were about, I want to say 100 and some questions that came in through that form. And I was able to just sort of pick a few that were asked repeatedly for this section, but many of you had fantastic questions. And so if we didn't get to it and you haven't gotten an answer, be ready to chat that in. So the last question, and this one came up multiple times, and I know the answer to this question, but I really wanted to pose it to you, Bart, because I think there's a lot of us have a different idea of the competitiveness of funding. So the question was asked in a couple different ways, but either they're a small nonprofit or they're a small organization really at the grassroots space. So these are smaller nonprofits, and most of our nonprofits in Idaho, at least half of them, have budgets of about $250,000 or less per year. So keep in mind this is a pretty broad question for a broad group of folks, but their question is, what do we do to increase our likelihood of being funded when competing against much larger nonprofits?
Yeah, that's a great question. I hear that from time to time. And there's really good news in two different areas there. One, you're not competing against larger nonprofits. Every organization that approaches the trust is competing against themselves. We look at each proposal based on its own merits. I know some of our fellow foundations in the Pacific Northwest and across the country will have a certain amount of money in a bucket for like arts and culture or education or health and human services. And they rank order the proposals that come in the door, and the best proposal gets funded, and then the next one gets funded, and they keep funding until they run out of money. And then other proposals that may have gotten funded last round didn't get funded this round because they had better proposals ahead of them. That is not how Murdock works. We look at each proposal. You could be the only, let's say, museum that comes in the door, and you might get turned down, or you might get funded based on the strength of your own project. Or there could be several organizations like yours from across the state or across the region, and they all could have good proposals, and they all could get funded. So you're not in competition. So you're just in competition with yourself. So the second part of your question was?
I think you covered it really. So if you're small, what do you do to increase your likelihood of being funded? And really, and I knew the answer, you're not competing against larger organizations.
So just increase the likelihood of being funded is just to have be well planned. And I think one of the questions I saw on the list that you kind of narrowed down is, what would be kind of the three top strategies or things you should do to try to get to increase the chances of being funded. And there's lots of things we look at, but if I kind of boil it down into three main areas, the trust looks at the strength of the organization. So are you a solid organization? Do you have solid funding? Do you have solid leadership? Good programming. Then we look at the project. Is the project well planned, well thought out? Is the timing right? And then the third area, do you have capacity to fund the project, fully fund it, and then capacity to sustain the project? Those are kind of the three critical things. So if that works for your organization, you've got a strong proposal. If you have weaknesses in those areas, you need to work on that, trying to strengthen those.
Yep. Oh, that's great. And my producers have a repeat the question note up here. Was it repeating the question that I just asked about the smaller, or this one? You want me to ask this one? Okay. So we're going to jump into your questions. So, and thank you. Please chat them in. And I call them my producers. They're my team, but I feel like we're in an official news situation here. So the question is, what considerations are given to nonprofits that receive no government funding? So, and I know that there are questions about if an organization receives any government funding, are they eligible for funds from the Murdock Trust? Are there considerations given specifically to those that receive no government funding? So that's the question that we have right now.
Yeah, I think there's a real interest in supporting underserved organizations and underserved populations. And I think those that don't receive government funding are definitely have a great interest, and those that have less opportunity for funding. So rural organizations, are close to the trust heart. And we're not opposed to government funding, but if an organization is primarily funded with government funding, it's of less interest to the trust than those that receive less government funding.
Yep. No, that's a great answer. And I know there's always seems to be some confusion around that. So I appreciate you clarifying that question. And I just wanted to make a note that as far as putting your questions in, so you can enter questions into the comment section, and it should be found on the right-hand side, directly to the right of the video. So if you're on Facebook or YouTube, that's where you can chat your questions. And so I apologize, I did not make that note for you earlier. So do we have another question that we can ask? I know that we do. There we go. So thank you for bearing with us. We're also testing this technology today, and it's really been quite fun. So the next question we have, and I love this because we hear this all the time. We've been turned down. What could we have done better? So, and the question is specific to this organization, but I think even more broadly so, Bart, the question is, when we're turned down, how do we go about learning maybe what we could have done differently or better to set us up for success later on? So once you've been turned down, how do you know what you could do better? And even another follow-up question is, how quickly might you choose to reapply, or how quickly can you do that? And then the advocates actually specifically asked this question about their organization, but I think just answering that question more broadly so is fine.
So hopefully the process of going through the grant proposal, grant review process with Murdock Trust will be, like Amy said, a highly educational process. I mean, our role as program directors, like I said, is not to be your advocate, not to advise you, but to advise the trustees. But in doing that, we ask the kinds of questions that are of interest to the trustees. And thankfully, the trustees are interested in issues that concern the strength and health of your organization. So they're concerned about it because they want to know that you're healthy and you're able to do and serve your constituents well. So we don't try to put hoops for you to jump through, but we do ask questions that are critical to your success or flourishing as an organization. So if you get turned down, usually the program director will try to give you an idea of what might be the reason for that. We don't always know for sure what the trustees are thinking, but we try to give you an idea of maybe some areas that we think there might be some weaknesses. As a matter of fact, during the site visit or after the site visit, after we listen to you share about your organization and your project, if we see red flags, we'll talk to you about those and give you a chance to explain those. Life happens to all organizations, and 2008, 2009 hit everybody, including Murdock. And now COVID is hitting everybody, including Murdock. So we know that there's lumps and bumps in the road. I think it's important to be open and honest and demonstrate that you're being financially responsible and you're making good leadership decisions. That's a critical piece. So listen to the questions that program directors have asked. And then after we make a phone call after the grants meeting to every organization that had a proposal in the door. So it's always hard to call an organization to say your grant was not funded, but we'll try to give you the best we can guess or understand an idea of why you might have been turned down. We don't always know, but we try to give you a hint, but you can just look back and think about the questions you were asked and see if there's some that you felt like maybe could have been stronger and strengthen that. And let me answer how quickly you can return to the trust. Let me give you two answers to that. So technically, here's a technical answer. You can only have one proposal in front of Murdock at a time. So the day of the grants meeting, you find out you're funded or not funded. The next day, you submit a new letter of inquiry. So that's a technical answer. The practical answer is we ask you to come with your top priority. And so hopefully the one you came with was your top priority. And so if the next day you've got a different top priority, the trustee kind of scratches their head about, okay, do they really know what their top priority is? And if you just receive funding, hopefully you'll have a chance to kind of complete the project. You don't have to complete the project, but at least get down the road with the project before you come back right away. So yeah, if you've turned down, I would just, wait, try to strengthen what you're doing, and then hopefully maybe even do the project you're talking about and then come back. But hopefully you can learn from that. And don't be discouraged. Some organizations will be funded the first time they've approached the trust and they've never talked to us before, and they just they're a strong organization with a good project. And other organizations have been there before and been funded, but maybe got turned down. One of my first year at the trust, there was an organization that had been turned down 3 times over the last 15 years for projects, never received funding, and they came with a proposal and the trustees funded it. And the difference wasn't me, it was just that they had a stronger proposal. They learned a little bit slowly, or maybe they just didn't have the right project, but they finally came in and they got a significant grant for a really good proposal. Also, that kind of brings up maybe another question I think I've heard asked is, how do you know how much to ask when you're thinking about making a request of Murdock? And one of the things we tell people is look at our website and look at the past grantees, look past grants, see what we've done for similar size organizations, for similar kind of projects, and look back over the past few years to get a sense of that. And we don't tell you how much to ask, but I would encourage you not to embarrass yourself by asking way out of line that shows you haven't done your homework. On the other hand, don't ask too small, because we're all going to do a lot of work, but try to ask what you think is kind of within the ballpark. And the one time you'll actually maybe get some advice from us is with that letter of inquiry. If you're asking way too small in a project that you could be asking more, our senior program director might say, feel free to, you could ask a little bit bigger than this, and so listen for that. But yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. That is a good question that we do hear quite a bit is the how much question. So that's fantastic. And this is sort of a similar question to what was asked before, but it's a little bit more nuanced. And I really kind of want to dive a little bit more deeply into some of the questions that the trust may have when reviewing your financials. So for example, so this is asking, is there a preference for types of funding sources? Governments versus grants. So we've kind of talked about, the trust position of government funding. But what I think is an even stronger question related to this question about funding mix is, what does the trust like to see in terms of funding sources for an organization? What are some indicators of a very healthy and well-rounded and well-funded organization? So what does the trust like to see on an organization's finances that would indicate they have the health and well-being, financially speaking, to be in a place where the trust would feel comfortable funding them?
Yeah, that's a great question. Once again, that's not an easy answer question. Multifaceted, different for different organizations. We try to take that into account.
Okay.
I frequently ask organizations what's kind of the best percentage ratio of earned revenue to contributed revenue for their sector. And there's very few people that usually can get a ballpark, and we kind of get a sense of a ballpark just from seeing so many organizations and seeing which ones seem to be most successful. We start to get a picture of the range of healthy organizations. What we like to see is, I guess, in their contributed funding, that there's they have a steady track record there. What's a little concerning is if there's an organization that does some grant stacking to try to support something, and they're continuing just to, to support things that way, and then they want the trust to come in and help with this, something related to that. That doesn't fit us so well, because if the grants don't come in, things could fall apart. That being said, on the other hand, there's organizations that receive regular government funding, and that's just a normal part of their funding stream. They've got a great history of that, and they've got other sources too. So that's not a deal breaker. So it's, each organization is unique, and we try to look at it based on their sector and how healthy they are themselves.
And that's a wonderful answer. And you really can't ask for a better answer than that. I do want to just take a minute, if I may, also to just talk for a second about the importance of board giving to your organization. So one of the things that the Murdock Trust does is they do ask you if you have 100% of your board members making a contribution to your organization as a personal gift. And I want to say that, and this is my little soapbox for a minute here, and I'm going to jump right on it, but every single one of your board members can and should make a contribution to your organization. How you facilitate that really, again, is dependent upon your organization in terms of, do you want to make a specific requirement to serve on your board? Is it a stretch gift for an individual board member? There's a bunch of different ways to look at it. But what I always tell people is, if your board members do not contribute to your organization, they're not bought in on your mission. So if a board member is not willing to part with their own personal finances in support of your organization, they may not be the right board member. But I love that organizations and foundations like the Murdock Trust really do look at that, because the health and strength of your board also is another indicator that they might choose to look at. So I just want to make a quick reminder about their website. So we're getting a few questions that are very organization specific. So if you have an organization-specific question for the trust, again, we mentioned their website's really very, very robust, and you can get a sense of the types of projects that they fund. You can get a lot of questions answered. So we're going to kind of avoid individual organizational specific questions, because we're trying to get at sort of bigger picture things. That being said, if after you visit the website and you still don't feel like you're getting the answer to the questions that you're looking for, please reach out to us, and we can make a connection to Bart after this to help get some of those more specific questions answered. So I think I'm super excited about this next question that has popped up, and I'm so happy to ask this. And you may or may not have current information about this, but does the Murdock Trust have plans to do some funding in diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice work?
We've always been interested in underserved. I guess that's maybe an area is close to our hearts. And so we look to see where is the greatest need, and who has fewer resources, who's doing good things and needs to be supported. And so that's kind of, I guess, our focus in that area.
Yeah.
And we're willing to provide funding maybe where others don't.
So really what you're saying sort of is the lens with which the trust views some of those requests is really identifying underserved populations and looking at how those grant dollars then can be leveraged in support of underserved populations, less resourced populations, and that's the way in which you approach that work. Right,
and the trust is not trying to, not agenda driven. So Correct. We try to say, what is your mission? What is your focus? What are you trying to accomplish? And we're not going to try to, I know some foundations will put out a request for proposals, or maybe they'll only invite you to come to them by invitation only. And so you have to be accomplishing what they're trying to accomplish. And sometimes they're trying to do that statewide and get organizations to do certain things. And we're saying, we're not trying to tell you how to do your work. We consider the nonprofit organizations the experts in their field and their community. They know that best. So we're trying to respond to what your top needs are and help you accomplish your mission.
Fantastic. Thank you. That is a great answer. I appreciate that so much. The next question we have is coming up. Okay, so now we have lots of words on there. I made them make the font really big so I could see it, and then it was on 2 pages. So I've got it now. So nonprofits with staff seem to have a higher probability of capital funding. So are there suggestions for 100% volunteer-driven nonprofit to move to the next level? So it's, again, that's a nuanced question, but when you're looking for capital funding, if you've got staff, the thinking is they've got a higher chance of receiving funding. So are there recommendations if you have an organization with just all volunteer-driven for them to be able to access some Murdock funding to move to the next level. And I think there are some programs specific to this that the trust offers.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. An organization with all volunteer staff seeking capital funding, so I'm not sure how big of a project they can take on. I mean, we don't have any guidelines concerning you have to have paid staff versus volunteer staff to be able to approach the trust for a capital project. I know there's a number of foundations that will fund smaller capital projects, like if your boiler goes out in your school or something that, the smaller $5,000, $10,000 grants. Murdock, being a regional funder and have capacity to help at a higher level, and because of the amount of investment we make in every proposal that comes in the door, we invest significantly amount of staff time and resources in reviewing that for the trustees. So our minimum grant is about $50,000. So, and we'd never fund more than half of a project, and the greater you ask, the smaller the percentage might be. So, I don't know if I have seen, let me back up, I have seen a few small all volunteer organizations take on a capital project that's smaller in nature, but, above maybe $100,000 or so dollars, and the trust has helped with that. So that has happened, but it's, having a paid staff is not critical to that, but usually the larger projects usually are from organizations that have bigger staff.
And I will say there is a way you can apply for some funding. So for example, if you'd like to bring on a new staff member to do the development work for you, and I really love how the trust structures that in the sense that it's leveled down funding over time, so that individual who then comes in to support your development work, they grow, your development portfolio over time, and then their support shrinks. The idea is that eventually that position can stand on its own 2 feet. So that's the question that you were asking in terms of are there opportunities to then bring in some development staff and move from volunteer to paid positions. There are some of those programs available as well.
Yeah, and so really to take on a development staff, I'm not aware of an organization that we've helped fund the development staff without them having an executive director on board. So your executive director is usually your first, is the chief fundraiser for the organization, regardless of how big your development staff is. But the trust in terms of staffing, helping build capacity, looks to take you from whatever your staffing is to the next level that you're committed to maintain. And then the timing needs to be right. And you need to have a good plan for success. So, and as Amy mentioned, as we've looked at requests for staff support over the years, we've seen requests for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever, and we found that those that we've given support over 3 years have been the most successful. So in year one, you can ask for 100% of the person's salary and benefits. You can ask for their equipment if you need new equipment, computer, desk, whatever for them. You could ask for some training, maybe some expanded office space if you need that. So what it takes to get that person started. And then in year two, of the things that the expenses that continue on into year two, then the trust could provide up to 2/3 of that. And then year three, 1/3. And by year four, you're fully invested in sustaining that position. So those have worked out really well. But again, we don't provide support for short-term funding. So if you want somebody for like just this one capital project and then that's it, that's not an area that the trust really focuses on. But if you're looking to expand your development department or add to for a long term, then that would be or any other staff, program staff, other strategic staff for your organization, that would be of interest to the trust to consider.
Fantastic. So we have another question, and I think this is probably a quick one, but so there's 29 different charitable designations from the IRS. And so the ones that most often apply for funding from the trust are the C3s, but does the trust favor C3s over any other? Are there any, can C6s, C4s? Does the trust accept letters of interest from other Cs outside of the charitable space?
I'm not familiar with that. Okay. I guess you'd have to, that'd be a
we can get back to
trust.
You. Yeah.
Or we can get back, I can get back to you on that.
Yeah, we can get that answer for you. The next question we have is sort of regarding the process. So the process is time consuming. Does the trust have plans to simplify their process? And I'm gonna interject, but then I'm gonna let Bart answer. And I mentioned this earlier, it is a time intensive process, but it's not, we're not asking for, $10,000 or $15,000. So what you're asking for in terms of the dollars, what you get out of that grant, to me was worth the time that we put in for two reasons. One, it's not a small ask that we're making. And two, it's so helpful for your organization. And also particularly, we've had some staff transition, people moving into different roles over time. So every time that we reapply for the grant, we might have somebody different sitting at our table. So it's also an informative process for your staff and your board members who also change over time. So for me, the process, yes, it's time consuming, but it was really worth it and very informative for our organization. So I'm going to defend their process just a little bit, but I'm going to let Bart answer that question. Do you have plans to simplify that process?
I think the process has been simplified a little bit, that we were just transforming from paper pencil to more paperless, and our website was being worked on when I left there, and now it's much more robust. And as Amy mentioned, you can do it all on the website, and you can see the progress of your proposal. Before that was not possible. So we're trying to make it easier for you. We've enhanced the website with helpful hints on how to write a good proposal and how to plan a good budget, etc. So even if you aren't planning on approaching the trust, Murdock Trust, I frequently steer people to the Murdock website just because there's so much great information there to help you write a proposal to anybody that would, any organization, really strengthen your proposal. So, and like Amy said, due to the size of the proposals that we consider, our average grant size is about $250,000 right now. So, that's a significant grant. And I hear when I meet with other foundations, sometimes they talk about, okay, how many successful grants have you had? The trust has a really high percentage of successful grants because we do our due diligence up front. So the trustees really want to know that Murdock Foundation is not a charitable, doesn't do charity, I guess I should say. We make investments. We make investments in the region to strengthen the region. So we look for a solid investment. And therefore, when the trustees decide to make a grant, they have great confidence that you're going to have capacity to do what you say you're going to do and impact the people you say you're going to impact. So that requires a certain level of due diligence on our part. And so we're not trying to make it tough, but it's just there's a lot to be looked at, and hopefully you will grow in the process. And I hear that, like Amy said, I hear that from lots of organizations. Sometimes, even if they got turned down, they felt like, man, that was so helpful because we asked questions about things they hadn't thought about, and they went back and worked on that and strengthened their proposal, and they're a more solid organization now than they were in the past. So we're hoping that's the case. We're not trying to be difficult, but there's just a lot we look at.
Yep, definitely. I think we have time for one more question, and I'm going to ask this one. So in the last few years, the trust has transitioned all grant management activities to the Flux portal with one point of contact at each organization. So has this been a helpful move for the trust and for the grantees? So I'll answer from a grantee's perspective. We really like the Flux portal. At any given time, I can log in. It lets me know when I have reports due, which I think is great. I was able to track the progress of the grant from the LOI through the approval process, and having one point of contact. It's just, I love it. And we were able to enter all the information in. So we felt that it was just at least getting the information into the portal was a lot simpler this year. And then as we get used to using it, it'll be easier and easier. So from our perspective, I found the Flux portal to be incredibly useful. And it was great anytime, Rudy came back to us and said, hey, we're missing this, or could you clarify this? We could just log back in and then upload it very quickly, which made it very easy for him to then access the information as he was putting, his package together for the trustees. So from your perspective, do you think the Flux portal has also helped support the trustees and the program officers in their work?
I think you kind of explained how it has. It just puts the information right at the program director's fingertips, so he can look at it right there and not have to go grab the file and dig through the file, but you can search it real quickly. It's much more robust.
Yes.
So we hope it's helpful for you and makes your job easier, and it makes our job easier also.
Definitely. So I'm going to kind of close this out. So there's another question about funding grants that are contingent. And I'm going to tell you actually one of our experiences in 2016 when we were reapplying for the first time to the trust in several years. And when I got the grant award, I cried a little bit, honestly, because it was contingent upon us actually building our own funding capacity. So the trust said, we believe in your project, we believe in the work that you're doing, but we believe that other people will believe in what you're doing. So the first year we received the full grant amount, but the next year we had to bring in a certain amount of fundraising. So I think it was a 1-to-1. So in order to get half of that grant award, we had to bring in at least half of that from outside funding. And then the third year, we couldn't get our grant amount until we had done 1.5 times the amount of that grant award. So what the trust did was really allow us and encourage us to strengthen our own funding portfolio. So that was the contingency that was placed upon our grant. And quite frankly, that was one of the best things that they have ever done for us, because when I look at where we were in 2016 and I look at where we are now, it was incredibly useful. So it wasn't, again, I cried thinking, oh my gosh, I'm new on the job. There's no way we're going to be able to do it. But we crushed it because we also had the right people at the table. So I really am a big fan, obviously you could tell, of the way that the trust partners with their organizations, the way they look at different grant opportunities. We're out of time for today, and we want to be respectful of everybody's time. So again, a lot of the questions that we saw were very specific to your organization. The website's very robust, so please visit the Murdock Trust website and see if you can get some of those questions answered. If there are additional questions that you're not finding the answers to, please reach out to us and we can help facilitate that information back for you. So I just want to again say thanks to all of you. Thanks to my team. Thank you, Bart, for giving up an hour of your morning to join us today. I just want to also, in closing, remind you that Philanthropy Day is coming up next week. So I will be in Coeur d'Alene to celebrate North Idaho on Monday. Friday, November 13th is our Southwest Idaho celebration, and then Monday, November 16th is our Southeast Idaho celebration. So we hope to see you. Please register and attend and help us celebrate organizations and individuals like the Murdock Trust and all the ways that they support the work that we do. So thanks everybody, and wishing you all well.